Hello dear Motorsport-Magazin.com friends and Formula One fans on practice day here in Imola. Finally the time had come. Finally we were able to see this retreaded Ferrari on the track. Maybe some of you are already sick of hearing about this big Ferrari update, but of course it was the dominant topic today and Charles Leclerc really got to grips with it. Best time in FP1, best time in FP2 in front of his home crowd. That obviously made a good impression. And also for the second Ferrari, things went really well for Carlos Sainz and Ferrari. P3 in the first free practice session, but then they experimented a bit with his setup. They said, okay, after 2 sprint weekends we'll take the opportunity now. Then went in the wrong direction, and that is why it did not go so well for him in the second free practice. But then you go back to the baseline and then it should work out quite well there too. The question that everyone is asking themselves is, of course, how much has this update really helped, or would the Ferrari be doing quite well on this track anyway? Anyway, shock clear. The Ferrari engineer made it clear again today that these 3/10 updates no longer exist in Formula One. We are only talking about 1/10 and so on. The development curves have all flattened out in this era of regulations, and that is also why he believes that there are only these small steps left, so he is trying to keep the ball rolling a bit. Yes, we'll probably never know, but of course that was a good announcement from Ferrari here on the practice day. But there was also bad news on the Ferrari side, because when Charles Leclerc took to the track in the first free practice session, we received an updated engine list from the FIA. As soon as the drivers have all left the pits, we always receive a PDF with the new engine components, and surprisingly, Charles Leclerc was included. Surprisingly, because he had actually already used 2 engines this season, and we are now at the 7th race. There are 4 engines in total for the entire season. 7 out of 24 races, so if the 3rd engine is already here, then something must have gone wrong. In fact, this was later confirmed. After Miami, they found problems with his engine. They then took the precaution of saying, okay, we don't want to run it now, at least not in the race. It can still be used in free practice, not here. Why? Well, they wanted to play it safe because they have the big update. That's why they said they'd rather postpone it a bit. Now the test drives or the training sessions are important, so don't take any risks. So the training unit for the future, and then see if everything still fits. Why not do it in between, somehow on the dyno, and then the engines are sealed? It's not that easy anymore, but if the engine does fail, there will most likely be a penalty for Leclerc at some point during the season, but we're not there yet. We'll stay with Ferrari because they've also made some personnel changes in the last few days. They've strengthened their team further. They've got a replacement team principal or deputy team principal in Jerome D'Ambrosio, who has just moved over from Mercedes, but he's not the only one who's gone over from Mercedes to Ferrari, including Luxira, a high-ranking engineer. At Ferrari, he will be called Head of Chassis Performance Engineering, which is always one of those exciting titles in Formula One where nobody knows exactly what he does. In any case, he will report to Enrico Calile, the boss on the chassis side. Those were some pretty spectacular personnel details that we've heard in the last few days. And now it appears that the change is not entirely one-sided. Apparently there is an exchange of personnel between Mercedes and Ferrari, so that the gardening leave, i.e. the transition phase, is a little shorter. Our colleagues at Autosport have reported that Simone Resta, who was a high-ranking Ferrari engineer, was once a Hazy engineer, then Ferrari again, and so on, that he is now to go to Mercedes, and with him Enrico Zampo, a software expert, and that this is to happen faster than would normally have been the case. It was also leaked on this training day that the head of aerodynamics at Mercedes will be leaving the team as well. Where to is not yet entirely clear, but James Ellison, the head of technology at Mercedes, has said, well, that's actually quite normal. There is always a turnover of staff in teams this big, and people don't just leave, they also come from other teams, including experienced people. It's a shame when you lose expertise, but then expertise comes from somewhere else. We at Motorsport-Magazin are also looking for expertise, namely your expertise. We are explicitly looking for a video editor to edit this video here, for example. When I'm blabbing again, there has to be an edit, or to take care of the camera and sound in our studio in Graz full-time, preferably as an internship. So apply now if you want to further improve our videos, jobs.motorsportmagazine.com, and then we will benefit from the expertise that comes to us. Let's take a walk to the back of the paddock and then go to the motorhome of Red Bull Racing. Yes, if Ferrari is in first place, where is there a Red Bull Racing? In the first free practice session, you could see that Max Verstappen was struggling. He was only fifth, 2.5 tenths of a second behind, and you could really see it in the car, in the handling. He had problems in Acro Minerali in particular, lost a lot of time there. At the entrance, he said he just did not know what to do there. Then later also had in variant Alter A over braking at the rear, then had to drive straight ahead once, things that you don't really know from Max Verstappen. Then they changed the setup a bit and things promptly went even worse for him in the second free practice session. 7th place, more than half a second behind Charles Leclerc's best time. And again, he had problems with the rear end, even had a nice off, drove into the gravel at Rivazza, and that is very, very unusual for Verstappen. At Red Bull, they are pretty clueless. They started badly. They lost time mainly in the middle sector, then changed it, the setup, and then were bad everywhere. So that's something you don't really know about Red Bull at all. And what you don't know about Verstappen in particular is that he struggles with the rear and can't calculate the rear and simply can't gain confidence there. The whole thing, yes, okay, the one lap, of course it was a bit affected by traffic. That's always a thing. This one lap, the tires are behind it. The second attempt is then not so good, so take it with a grain of salt. But the long runs were also quite unusual for Red Bull, really bad. Worse than those of Ferrari, and also worse than those of McLaren, which we mustn't forget at this point when we talk about the Ferrari update and the great times. Lando Norris had to abort his fastest lap. He would have at least been up there at the front, roughly at Leclerc's level, so we definitely have to reckon with McLaren too, let's say that at this point. But what's going on with Red Bull? They couldn't answer the question. They said yes, they just never got into this window with the setup and are now hoping that they can make the step overnight. We've seen that several times in the simulator. Milton Keynes, Sebastian Buemi, he'll probably drive his ass off tonight. We've often seen big leaps at Red Bull racing from Friday to Saturday, but the jump this time must be really huge, and above all, it's just that the Red Bull wasn't somehow good on one lap and bad in the long run, or vice versa. No, it was bad in both, and we haven't seen that in this form in the season, at least not to this extent. So from a neutral Formula One point of view, that's obviously good news. We're looking forward to a really exciting race weekend and a really exciting day. Oliver Bearman already had that. The Ferrari Junior has been a household name ever since since he had to replace Carlos Sainz in Saudi Arabia, which was very short term. He is a super talent. Ferrari Junior is currently still driving in Formula 2. He crashed here in training, destroyed his car. Then he had to go over to Haas to drive Formula 1 practice. He said it was a strange feeling after he flew off in the Formula 2 car, then straight into Formula 1. But he did a really great job there again, 15th place. Ayao Komatsu said, that's not the only thing, the performance, the way he talks to the engineers, the feedback, the calmness that he radiates, that made quite an impression. So you can't neglect that when you're talking about drivers for 2025. But that still wasn't Ollie Bearman's crazy day. After that, it was back to the Formula 2 car, the Prima Racing car. Qualifying was on the agenda. Did a good job, finishing second, until his lap time was cancelled. Then he was suddenly at the back of the field. And then at some point, the lap time was no longer deleted. It was reinstated, as they say. And then he was back in second position. So a roller coaster of emotions for Ollie Bearman. You can hardly have more roller coaster of emotions on such a Formula 2 and Formula 1 day. Track limits kept us a bit busy. Yes, I have to say, because we are in Imola, a wonderful track. I was also at the track today, looked at the cars in Tamburello. It's unbelievable to see the speed of the cars, how it comes across the bumpy track. But of course, for us spectators, it seems extra dynamic. Then the gravel beds were frequented in large numbers by the drivers, so that's great. And then the Formula 2 fights there, so track limits also the Formula 3. In Formula 1, we don't expect it for the time being because the cars are a bit wider, so when you get out there, you're immediately in the gravel trap, so I hope that won't be an issue. It would be a real shame. In Formula 2, it was also a relative mess because the cameras were still relatively badly aligned today. You couldn't say for sure, was he out now, yes or no? Overnight, they will make a few adjustments for Formula 1. Everything should fit, and I hope that we won't have this discussion, but that we can simply enjoy this sporting day on this sensational racetrack. From Ollie Bearman to our Bear Strong app, which you hopefully already have. If not, download it for free for Android and iOS, where you can of course follow the sessions live with ticker and pages. You'll also get push notifications if you want, how the sessions went, background analysis, everything a fan's heart desires. So if you can't either here at the track, I've already met some of you here, always nice to see you, then be sure to follow along in our free app.